But in your book, you do outline these 4 hidden challenges that we all face in communication. And you also describe courageous communication as kind of a full body, full mind, kind of this full heart effort. So talk a little bit about what that courageous communication might look like in general for engineering leaders, whatever you can share with us.
It really looks so different depending on the diverse individual, as you know. It could look like realizing that we're very talkative, so making a point to speak less. It could be realizing that we're more comfortable when someone else is on the mic or in the spotlight, or even just sitting on their butts and speaking at a table of 10 with our Monday morning meetings, and we tend to hang back.
As technical leaders, we're expected to be strong communicators. But the truth is, great communication rarely comes naturally. It takes practice, self-awareness, and the courage to face the hidden challenges that often hold us back. I've worked with and spoken to many AEC leaders doing their best to connect with their teams, but still feeling like, something's getting lost in translation. It's not easy, but the issue is an effort. It's knowing what's getting in the way. And that's why I'm really excited to welcome Michelle Gladieux, president of Gladieux Consulting and author of Communicate with Courage, Taking Risks to Overcome the 4 Hidden Challenges. Now, you may have heard Michelle from her appearance on our podcast, Women in Engineering. Today, she joins us again to go even deeper into what it takes to lead with clarity, empathy, and confidence. And in this episode, we're going to really do a deep dive into the biggest communication barriers that leaders face, like hiding, rationalizing, or settling. And we're going to give you some practical strategies to navigate these things, along with conflict, feedback, everything that you need to do as a technical leader, because we know it's not easy to make that transition. I made it myself, and it's difficult. But the strategies that Michelle is going to share will help you with your transition from technical professional to leader. I'm Anthony Fasano, and this is the AEC Leadership Podcast. All right, so now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Michelle Gladieux is the president of Gladieux Consulting and author of Communicate with Courage, Taking Risks to Overcome the 4 Hidden Challenges. She's also welcoming her back because she was on the Women in Engineering, one of our other podcasts, not too long ago as well. So, Michelle, welcome to the AEC Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Anthony, and congratulations on your team's success and your success. And I like the way you move through the world and try to help us all communicate better.
Well, thanks to you for everything you've done around communication. Communication is, I would say, one of the bigger challenges to technical professionals, engineers kind of getting to where they want to go in their career, because we start out doing a lot of calculations. And if we want to kind of take the next step in our careers, we need to be able to communicate better. And so I think kind of what we're going to talk about today will hopefully, unlock some stuff for some of our listeners around communication. And, we'll get into your book a little bit and all the frameworks that you have available to people. But let's start, Michelle, by maybe you telling us a little bit about your background and kind of what led you into organizational psychology and eventually to Gladieux Consulting.
You bet it. You bet. I was a lucky freshman going into Purdue University in West Lafayette. I was 17. I got hooked up with an academic counselor and a long line of students who were waiting to get put into classes. And I remember saying to that person, I'm not sure what to major in here at Purdue. I love business. I love psychology. I don't want to be a clinical psychologist. Am I going to have to choose? And the counselor said, well, have you heard of industrial organizational psychology? And I said, I've heard a little bit about it, heard more about it from the counselor, and then realized, oh, this is perfect for me. I would get to study human behavior and try to apply plans, processes, best practices to help people know what will work and what won't work for them as communicators. Yeah, so fate was sealed at 17 and stayed there at Purdue through a master's of science, which then allowed me to teach as soon as I graduated. So when I was 23, I started as an adjunct faculty member at a couple different universities here in my home state of Indiana and taught for about 20 years. And then as I was doing that, I was a corporate HR and training director and was building Gladieux Consulting on the side. So in 2004, I went for it and resigned from my corporate HR position and thought, let's give this a shot. My heart sure felt happy. I had some friends that were worried about me and maybe thought I was off my rocker a little bit because I was walking away from insurance and quarterly bonuses and all the things that make you secure. But I had to follow my heart. I wanted to work all around, as you have. I think I've heard you say you've worked in 40 states. Is that still accurate?
Yeah, I try to find engineers wherever they are.
They need you, right? We all need you. We all need to look at our communication skills for real, because it is a predeterminate to success and joy in life. And also, it just makes life a lot less complicated when you get better at sending and receiving messages. So we're here for a short time. I think my thesis is going to be, let's be willing to look at ourselves and every day try to use some pro moves, as I call them, so that we can not keep passing by the little things that make a big difference as communicators.
Yeah, and you really have done a lot all around communication. And one of the things that you've done is you've written a book, Communicate with Courage, and you can see the book there over Michelle's shoulder. She has a workbook that goes with the book, which I have, which she sent to me with the book, which is great. You've got these cards that can go along with it. And you have a lot of different, and it's very practical, the stuff in your book, which is great, because I think communication, especially for us as technical professionals, can be very scary because it's not something that we're used to. It's not something that we were taught. We're very analytical. But in your book, you do outline these 4 hidden challenges that we all face in communication. And you also describe courageous communication as kind of a full body, full mind, kind of this full heart effort. So talk a little bit about what that courageous communication might look like in general for engineering leaders, whatever
Yeah.
you can share with us.
It really looks so different depending on the diverse individual, as you know. It could look like realizing that we're very talkative, so making a point to speak less. It could be realizing that we're more comfortable when someone else is on the mic or in the spotlight, or even just sitting on their butts and speaking at a table of 10 with our Monday morning meetings, and we tend to hang back. So I write a lot of coaching goal plans that after personality assessment, when we get some nice, robust, qualitative and quantitative data that's valid and reliable, then I can start to interact with the person and then write monthly goal plans so they have 4 or 5 things to do. And that usually involves them, honestly, moving a little bit outside of their comfort zone to try on new behaviors. It's experimentation, and with analytical thinkers, I've noticed through the last probably 25 years-ish of doing this, those that are in the engineering professions and related professions can be highly successful when they decide to become better communicators, because their analytical minds allow them to follow a path or process. If you have a good coach, or you have a good book, or you have good materials, or you take a good class, whatever kind of immersive learning experience you put yourself into, analysts and analytical thinkers follow instructions and can follow the process well and try things, and not expecting that they know the outcome, can still do the first steps usually pretty accurately, and that yields positive outcomes.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about all that, but most importantly to me is, reading the situation and communicating, based on maybe the person you're communicating with or the project team you're communicating with, right? Understanding how they want to receive information. I'm a big sports fan, and the other night I was watching a game, and after the game, they kind of interviewed the coach, and he was basically like, I just kind of tell my players that they kind of have to read the game, right? And like we react to how the game unfolds, right? And I feel like that's very similar to communication. Like you got to get into the room, get into the meeting. Someone may be very analytical, right? They might be presenting a lot of facts and figures. Another person might be very expressive and a very high level communicator. And so I do think that, to Michelle's point, you have to really pay attention to the way people communicate, because in engineering and architecture and construction, we're dealing with like multiple parties internally and externally on every project. So, that's just for you, a big part of communication has to be kind of reading that team.
Sure. And when we do a ton of training and coaching in the construction industry, and those folks, they tend to be salt of the earth. Even at the highest leadership levels, they weren't people who wanted to necessarily be behind a desk all day. If you're going to ask them to sit for a webinar or seminar, you'd better know what the training or learning outcomes are going to be. How are they going to use this immediately? I might change up my use of language so that I'm throwing in a couple or allowing myself to throw in a couple cuss words, which I would do normally if you and I were just having lunch, but I might not if it was a more academic training setting. It's analyzing the audience, and it's knowing those 4 human personality types which are consistent the world over, no matter what you call them. We call them, in my company, we call them amiable, which is a true team player who wants harmony, the expressive, whom you mentioned, large, big picture thinker, could talk to anyone about anything, comfortable in the spotlight, analysts who are more controlled. They usually slow their roll. They want to check things out. They're contemplative and detail oriented. And then drivers, who are the folks who want to get as much done as possible in a day as quickly as possible. All of those come with great gifts. All of them come with those gifts wedded to weaknesses. We like the idea of people understanding personality so they know themselves. And then typically people figure out, oh my gosh, just as I did, I was thinking the whole world was driver expressive like me. So I was frustrated with employees, coworkers, family members, etc., when they didn't perceive and then act in ways that made sense to my DNA and life experiences and upbringing. Since opening my eyes to the fact that we're all wired differently, we've had different mentors, different priorities. Very importantly, some of us have had good role models and stable homes as we grew up, and some of us have not. And not that you can't overcome that kind of an obstacle to become a brilliant communicator. In fact, it can give you more empathy. It makes sense to think about some of these behaviors we see in the workplace are really holdovers from things that were going on in childhood. Maybe that's why I didn't want kids and I don't have kids, because I'm still working with a lot of people's baggage that they're bringing in, and understandably so, from those ages of 2 to 12 years old, when a lot of your communication style gets set in place.
Yeah. And I think, going back to those kind of personality and work styles is, I tell people that if you're speaking to people and you're not taking into account what their personality is or how they receive information, it could almost be like you're going to another country, but you're refusing to speak their language, you're speaking yours, right? So they're sitting there like they're not really getting you, and you're not really going to get that far, right? Unless you kind of put the effort in to understand how they communicate. So I think it's really important for leaders in every career, especially those of you that might be technical professionals, because it's something that we probably got to work a little bit harder at because we didn't have a lot of that training. If you manage projects, it's going to be really important because you're going to have a lot of different stakeholders you'll have to deal with. It could be another technical professional you're dealing with, or you could be speaking at a public meeting with just citizens that are surrounding your project, right? That have all different kinds of work styles. So it is really important, and you should pay attention to that. Probably as one of the most important aspects of how you communicate. And Michelle, you mentioned earlier that in your book you have a lot of pro moves that you can share, and I'm wondering if you could share some pro moves maybe from the book or just in general related to giving and receiving feedback, because I think that is something that technical professionals tend to struggle with, but I do think it's an important part of your communication and your relationships with the people you work with, and is being able to give feedback, but also receive it.
Yes, I will highlight something you just said, and it was about how you are interacting with people when they're from a different country. They are different from you in some way, literal country or different cultural background or different personality, age, gender, etc., amount of experience. We need to be very careful when giving feedback, not to let ourselves believe that the person we're giving feedback to or asking it from is any less important than we are, because at the human soul level, I believe we're all equals. And if you don't believe that and you haven't investigated your own conscious and unconscious bias, it comes out in your tone and in your word choice and in your timing. And as soon as you communicate with someone as if you think they are less than you have spoiled the communication. They're not interested in feedback from you, and they're certainly not going to give you feedback. Why would they want to give you the gift of their opinion and something they see that you could possibly do better if they feel that you're one downing them? So I spend a lot of time trying to coach people into understanding and believing that while we are all different, there is no one human more valuable than any other. And when we really look at ourselves and think about where we might not quite believe that, whether we are giving ourselves too much credit or not enough credit, then I start to see people's feedback giving and receiving really even out and become much more successful. And they earn maybe the best gift you can get in the workplace and at home, and that's trust. So I have team meetings with my team. My team is 7 people spread around the Midwest, and we do executive coaching and team training and strategic planning for companies around the nation. And So we meet in the evenings a lot. And I know tonight when I see them, if I had something that I was disappointed in that I had to speak, or that I thought we could do better, or that they could do better, I had a tip for them, I know that it would be received with them already understanding my motivation is good. My motivation is fair. I I happen to love these people, but I can certainly, in all the companies I've worked with and all the clients I've worked with, find something to like come from that place. Your intention is so important. Another tip I would give is that when you are giving feedback, why don't you start with the preamble? Especially if you're not good at it yet, important word. Uh, a preamble allows you to say something like, hey, this isn't my area of expertise. It's more yours, but I'm wondering if these reports could look a little different. It would be more helpful for my team. You know, here's one I use often. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but I'd like to offer some feedback. It brings the hackles down. It settles the ego down before you open your mouth. We've developed, as you have with EMI, a ton of great free tools, especially in 2020, 2021, when we weren't getting to be in front of audiences in person as often. I'm still writing every day and creating tools, so we had to put them somewhere. They're at GladioConsulting.com. If our listeners today and viewers go to GladioConsulting.com, which I hope will be in your show notes, click on free tools. And one of those free tools is the feedback challenge. And it's a one-page, downloadable, simple one sheet that you can then save and send to coworkers, family, you name it. Clients, impressive to send to customers and clients. No one's doing this. Very few people have the guts or the courage to do this. And the question on the sheet is, what's something that you enjoy about working with me or communicating with me? And then what's something you sometimes think I could do better? And I use the sometimes in the question. So the people who are afraid to tell you what they really see, but you need to hear, this sometimes is a qualifier, softens things for your ego, softens things if they're conflict avoidant or nervous about challenging communication. And all around the nation, we've assigned this to teams. They do it with each other. We give them a week. Make sure you give it to 12 different people. In the next training event, we say, all right, we're going to review the feedback challenge. We don't have time for all of you to read, 10 or 15 or 20 papers handed back to you. So simply select your favorite piece of praise that really made you glow, inside, and then your favorite piece of criticism that you can use. It's so wonderful, especially to see a team popping off one at a time. Okay, I'll go first. Okay, favorite piece of praise. This person said that I'm a really great public speaker. Oh, great. What was your favorite piece of criticism? Oh, this came from this other person. They'd like me to respond to emails sooner. And I'm going to with that person. Then you know how people see you without the distance of a 360 assessment, which scrubs all the names out of the data.
Yeah, that's great. I really like, and we'll definitely link to Michelle's website in the show notes. You could pick up that resource. It sounds like something that's really practical. And yeah, I think what you said about this whole idea of, treating people as equal as part of that is really, really important. And I say that in our industry because I see a lot of AEC leaders that are very condescending to people they work with. And I think part of the reason for that, and I'm only making an assumption here, but, we have in the private world, especially, we have billing rates. Right. And the more senior you are, you're billing your time out at a higher rate. So I could see how someone could think like, well,
that's their value.
I'm expensive and, you're not. And, and I think that that's really a bad thing for our industry. And I think there's a lot of great leaders out there that aren't paying attention to that. And they are doing, as you suggest, but I've seen it many times just in my own career working as an engineer where that's not the case. So I do think that it is important to get feedback, not just give it as you're a leader, because you need to get feedback from your team members. And then you certainly want to kind of take that feedback, process it, and try to make changes and make improvements. Otherwise, there's no point in asking for it if you're not going to kind of act on it. And so,
amen. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've had some really good arguments with the engineers that I was raised by. My father was an electrical engineer. My big brother was an electrical engineer. My other big brother was a software engineer and physicist. And then mom taught poetry and creative writing. So I feel like I have more than one person in my head. That's for sure. When I hear their voices. So we needed to have logical debates at our supper table, and science fairs were very important. And boy, did we go all out in science fairs. I was using a Geiger counter when I was in grade school to figure out radiation, things like that. But with a strong mother's presence who was highly skilled and emotional intelligent, I was getting that information as well. So I think, and not that I don't have room to grow in both IQ and EQ. However, let's try to avoid thinking that one is better than the other. And I think as the human race evolves, we are noticing, I mean, that's probably up for discussion. Some might want to argue that we're devolving. I'm an optimist. I'm going to say we're evolving and learning. There's a lot of inventions and technology we can point to, but I think we're also evolving in our humanity and our ability to understand and use emotions, and you can't keep them out of the workplace. And they will keep you from succeeding if you don't develop comfort with your own emotion, ability to name your emotion, speak about your emotions appropriately, care about others' emotions, and ask them about how they feel about things. That might be the next frontier for a lot of folks who are more technically minded.
Yeah, so let's go there now. I mean, you're obviously a big advocate for emotional intelligence in the workplace. And, in high pressure project based industries like architecture, engineering, and construction, maybe you could talk a little bit about how EQ can really help leaders to navigate challenging moments like conflict, right? Which we have all the time on our projects. How can they handle that and still show, empathy and kind of protect the team morale?
Absolutely. First thing I would say is handle it. We all know when there is weirdness in the environment. When something feels off, it probably is. And the best thing to do in that case is, in a professional way that doesn't get too personal, ask. So we could have this interview and I could have some thoughts about, maybe you said something, in the closing and it stuck with me. And I thought, do we have an issue between us? I could reach out to you and say, hey, let's go back to the preamble and statement of intention. I want to continue working with you well past this podcast. I had kind of a weird feeling there towards the end when you said this, or I said that, or I looked at your face. Name what you see or what you feel or what you hear, right? Using your 5 senses. And then say, did I do something to offend you? Or is there something that we need to talk about? Is there any weirdness here between us? However you would like to word that. Is something up with us? And would you please talk with me about it? And when I do that, I'd say, sometimes I'm wrong and there isn't something going on that needs to be discussed, whether it's family or coworker, employee or coaching client. But often I am picking up on something that's not spoken, but you can sense. So we learn to trust our gut and then check our gut. Trust our gut, use the intuition, check our gut, use logic and empirical measurement, so to speak. And sometimes people will say, oh no, everything's great. And especially whether it's a male or female voice and it goes that high, I think everything's not great is still what I believe. But I will then, if I'm doing a good job as a communicator, I'll say, okay, well, I just feel like there's something off. If you want to talk about it, I'm interested anytime. I'm always interested in improving our relationship. So I want to leave that door open. And then you have to really mean it. And you'd be surprised that, months later, I've had people come back to me and say, hey, there was something, it's this, let's talk about it. Or it was all me. I was going through this outside of work. Thanks for asking. Did not want to talk about it with anyone. So I appreciated you sensing that and saying something. So tip number 1, if something seems off, it might just be off. Be the courageous communicator who politely and professionally gives people a chance to speak and make sure that it's safe for them to do so with you. And you may then begin to develop, again, we move towards trust, which is often an outcome of using emotional intelligence. So ask what's up if you sense something is up. Would be a good start. And know your emotion, name it. I had a friend who was promoted. I'm so excited for her. She'll be making far more than me. I feel, why am I not just wanting to get to the offer to celebrate with a fun lunch? What else is this? Oh, it's jealousy. I'm both excited for her, thrilled for her, and jealous a little bit. And so I want to point out that sometimes it's not one emotion. It's like an onion. It's layers of emotion. We have to give ourselves the patience and love to kind of sort through. A coach can help with this. A counselor can help with this. Sometimes you've got talented HR professionals. So figure out your emotion, and then you're going to take a scientific wild-ass guess at the other person's likely emotion, and that will help you with your approach. As you can see, no short answer about EQ.
Right.
Are you open to building it is number 1, and will you be brave enough to bring up when something needs to be discussed?
Yeah, and I think it's a very kind of people focused approach to leadership, right? Which is what can be tough for technical professionals because, we're more in the books and in the
Mhm.
calculators when we start our career. We're not as engaging with other people, but as we move into leadership roles, we need to think about other people and the emotional side of it. And, this can really help us to do that. And like you said, requires some, the ability to build up your courage to do that. But if you can, it's going to definitely differentiate you
And
as a
we
leader in
need
this
both,
industry.
Anthony, as you know, courage and skill. I was very afraid that people might think that my book is about get out there and be brave, go out unprepared, right? Or think that you're the expert in the room and go ahead and speak up. Before we start to use our courage, let's build our skills as communicators. So I want to say, I think in the book, I tried to give equal billing and best practice ideas towards build your skill as a communicator, and now don't keep yourself from using it once you've built your skills. So people do need to do some self-study about this and then asking for feedback from others, just saying, this is the year. Tell people this year, one of my goals is to become a more expert communicator. I'd love to know when you see me speak in a meeting or when I handle a situation, I'd love for you to know that I'd like to know what you see. So I want to give you that. So I never present without a confederate in the room, if possible, who is going to, aside from all the evaluations I'll see from the training events, I want somebody who's going to break it down for me, ideally on the walk to the parking lot, the drive to the airport, or dinner after, and tell me a couple things they thought went well and a couple things I could do better. So find your partner, your feedback partner for that. And remember that that is use of EQ, just the opening your mouth and saying, this is the year I become a better communicator. Will you help me by sharing what you see?
That's great. Yeah. And I think, again, it comes back to being open, right? And getting that feedback, talking to people. That's going to help you grow. And so a lot of technical professionals are promoted into kind of management or leadership positions and not given any formal communication training. However, that communication is going to be critical to them being successful in those positions. So, what is one skill or one action that these emerging AEC leaders can take to help them, build those skills so they can become great leaders?
I think the value of a robust, valid, reliable personality assessment can't be underrated. And we use one that allows us to look at dozens of different constructs, not just sort of those big four that you and I discussed at the beginning of this interview, but extroversion, introversion, and decision making preferences, know your conflict preferences. So find a reputable provider. And this is not a strengths inventory. This is not just the happy stories, which are good to know too. We want something that's going to break it down to you with paragraphs such as like negative perceptions others may have of you because of your strengths. And when I first read the best personality assessment I've ever taken, which now my company has used for the last 13 years, we've been in business full time, 21 years. I remember I was on a plane and I was reading some of those paragraphs, just getting more and more steamed and offended at what it was saying about me. But once I calmed down, I also realized, oh, there were sure a lot of strengths about myself I agreed with right away. Oh, that's me. That's me. So look at the dark side of your strengths because we tend to overuse our strengths. Find a good personality assessment and take that. And then remember, we've all stereotyped you. It is the way the human mind works. It is very handy for just like what you and I did to prepare for this podcast. I listened to you on podcasts and I read your work and I read about you. You did the same with me. We've shared resources. And now we have a stereotype about one another. And there are probably some truths in that. And then there are things that we are lumping into that general stereotype that aren't true because we haven't known each other well, not yet. So just remember, others are stereotyping you. You're not going to be able to prevent that. So you're going to have to go out of your way if you are improving as a communicator, conflict manager, negotiator, public speaker, listener, leader, say it. This is my goal. This is how I hope to grow. Watch for it in me. Otherwise, I'm concerned that our viewers and listeners will do a lot of the hard internal work. And it's also joyful. It's fun. It's challenging. But because people don't have a lot of time to really consider you, remember to overcome stereotypes. You have to let people in a little bit and use your emotional intelligence to share about how you are growing so that we can give you some credit for doing so instead of saying, oh, you know Sue, oh, you know Robert, and that's how they'll always be. Nothing gets me more fired up than, well, we were going to let you coach this leader, Michelle, or we're going to send them to the training events, but he's never going to change. Too set in his ways. Like that's BS. A human can learn as long as they're breathing. So those are some.
Yeah.
I have
No,
strong opinions about this. Can you tell?
No, it's true. I mean, we need to have a continuous growth mindset, and that we can grow as leaders throughout our entire careers, which is really important. And I do think an assessment is an awesome place for anybody to start on their leadership journey, because you can't improve unless you know where you need to improve, and sometimes where you think you need to improve is not really where you need to improve. So getting the feedback from an assessment, or maybe it's something like a 360 where others are assessing you and giving you feedback, is an excellent way that you can kind of start to build skills in the right areas for your leadership journey.
Can I tell you a quick funny story about using that feedback challenge?
Sure.
One educational, one funny. We started at the 122nd Fighter Wing for the U.S. Air Force here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We were doing half days every Friday, different communication topics. I found myself up in front of all the command at the base saying, hey, why don't you tell me what people who work for you on this base feel about working for you? Because this contributes to retention, production, performance, etc. And I said, on the whiteboard, I put a plus and then I put a delta for what would they change. And I waited, and there was, for the first time in this series, crickets. No one said a darn thing. Not a good feeling as an instructor or public speaker. And I asked, why? Why is this a tough question? And they ended up saying, well, we give directives and people salute. Like, we don't ask, how do you feel about working for me? Right. However, we do want to retain these airmen. Okay, so how about we create the feedback challenge? And I called it at that time the Fighter Wing Feedback Challenge, and put this together and emailed it to all of them, made it an assignment for the next week. One of the commanders came in and said, you said, 12 or 15 people would be good to send it to. Well, I'll have 37 direct reports on base. I didn't want to create, and I was so pleased he remembered this concept, an in and out group. We were talking about how we all have an in and out group in our careers. The in group gets more eye contact, feedback, praise, coaching, open-ended questions like, how was your weekend? Or, hey, what do you think about this idea? That's in group. Out group gets less of all of that. So this gentleman had the emotional intelligence to think ahead. How will the other 13 or 14 feel if I only give this to a handful of my people? If I give this to 15 people or 20 people and I don't hit the rest, wouldn't there be talk perhaps? And wouldn't I wonder why did Anthony get to answer that for the commander and not me? So he brought a spreadsheet with 37 names, the positive that they had to say, if anything, the change they would request if they had a wish to be granted. And he was working on what he was going to do more of, what he was going to do less of. I was so proud.
Wow.
With our local jail, the Allen County Jail, we're training the sheriff's office, and the jailers and the jail commander got involved. We always ask the top of the organization to get involved in coaching and training, professional development, so that everyone knows that the top of the organization, the C-suite, right, so to speak, hasn't concluded that they're perfect, and everyone else should be looking at themselves. So we always ask to start at the top. The jail commander, wonderful deputy chief, passed out the feedback challenge. And then when he came back and presented his favorite piece of constructive criticism and his favorite piece of praise, his favorite piece of constructive criticism was, I wish you would try to look less murdery. He's a tough guy. He's big guy. And as someone else told him, you could inform your face if you're ever having a pretty good day. Because when he walks in the room, there is a certain look that he has, and he wasn't aware of it before.
Wow.
We all assume that we're in some big trouble. It's a very tough environment, but the employees are that keyed in, as they are in every workplace environment. They're reading everything they can. Body language, tone, volume, word choice, it all matters. We should all study it forever.
Yeah, no, good stories. And that's just an example of one piece of feedback that can make a dramatic change. Like that individual there that you just mentioned, just maybe can change up his makeup a little bit in terms of coming into a room and how he approaches people. And that could really have a big impact on his team. So those are the kind of things that you can do. And again, You can get this feedback resource sheet at Michelle's website, which is gladieuxconsulting.com. Again, communicate with courage. Michelle, it was great to have you on. I've been, reading through your stuff. It's very practical. There's frameworks to it, which I think technical professionals really like because it helps us to move forward on something that is not that easy to move forward on. And I really appreciate you taking some time to come with us and spend some time with us here on the podcast.
Anytime.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michelle. She is great and she is awesome on all things communication. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help technical professionals be the best leaders they can be. I'll see you next week.